A warm welcome back to the History Show here on Uxbridge FM, and Ken Pearce is back. And we love these little talks on unusual happenings. This one is Unusual Happenings number 3.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. On Harefield Common in May 1827, a most unusual cricket match took place. A local farmer, Francis Trumper, was very proud of his black and white thoroughbred sheepdog, and often spoke in praise of the swiftness with which it worked and its speed in rounding up and retrieving. This was overheard one day by 2 visitors who disbelieved and mocked him. So, according to the records of the event, Francis Trumper challenged those 2 gentlemen of Middlesex to a game of 2-a-side cricket, with his sheepdog as his teammate. The 2 gentlemen were highly amused at the prospect and agreed to allow the sheepdog to play, also allowing the farmer to bat for his dog. Only 1 wicket was to be used. The 2 gentlemen were so convinced that they would win quickly and easily that they staked a large sum of money as a bet on the result of the game being in their favour. Little did they realise the high odds they were up against, or indeed the prowess of the sheepdog. By now, news of the game had reached a local newspaper, and an item published in the columns giving the date and time of the challenge game attracted thousands of curious spectators from far and wide, some even coming from London and Surrey to Harefield to witness the strange event. And bookmakers took bets among the spectators, and wealthy gamblers wagered 5-1 against the farmer Trumper and his dog winning. A coin was tossed, and the 2 gentlemen of Middlesex decided to bat first. So each batted in turn, while Trumper bowled and the dog fielded. The gentlemen soon found that although they hit out, the speedy sheepdog quickly chased and bore down on the ball, so that runs were not easy to get. Even when they drove a shot hard towards the boundary, it was only seconds before the dog was racing up to his master, ball in mouth, to drop it into his hands, and only 1 run could be scored. In their first innings, after both gentlemen had been run out, their total was 3. The farmer then batted, and it quickly became obvious that the man fielding was much slower in returning the ball than the farmer's dog. So the farmer quickly scored 3 before being bowled. Then he batted again for his dog and scored 2 more before being bowled again. But when they saw the way the dog played, the crowd changed their minds, and the betting now swung the other way. So the odds were now 4-1 in favour of the farmer and his dog winning. The 2 gentlemen batted briefly in their second innings and scored 3 more before they were both run out again. So they were now 1 run ahead when the farmer went in to bat for the second time. He hit 2 runs without loss, and so the match ended. He and his dog had gained a decisive win with their 2 wickets still standing. The 2 losers paid up with a smile, one even offering to buy the dog so as to organise his own 2-a-side games to gamble on. But the farmer would not part with his dog. To the cheers of the spectators, the victorious team of 1 man and his dog left the field, and, with the losers, retired to the nearest inn to celebrate. Just two little points to add to that. The Trumper family were very well known in Harefield. And in 1825, one of them, James Trumper, drew a beautiful map of Uxbridge, which was almost a work of art, which fortunately survives today. And as a result of that, when the roads were being named after the war for the new bypass, one of them was called Trumper Way. It's the part of the road that passes the Roman Catholic Church. The other point I must mention is that in Victorian times, some of the members of the Trumper family went to live in Australia. And in the early part of last century, one of them, Victor Trumper, was actually captain of the Australian cricket team. So obviously there was some innate cricket ability in the Harefield farmer who played with his dog. My second passage this morning is, I'm going to read from the Times newspaper on the 3rd of August, 1841. It was when Queen Victoria and Prince Albert passed through Uxbridge. Can I just mention one thing before I read the part? The account in the paper says that the royal couple came down Page's Lane in their coach. Now, Page's Lane is the old name for Harefield Road. In more recent times, a housing estate was built off Harefield Road, and it was then that the old name was revived. So, strangely enough, there is still a Page's Lane today, but not the one mentioned in this account. So here we are, the Times newspaper, 3rd of August, 1841, headline, Her Majesty's Visit to Uxbridge. On Saturday last, the town of Uxbridge was a scene of great animation and rejoicing, in consequence of it becoming known that Her Majesty the Queen and her illustrious consort, Prince Albert, would pass through the town on their way to Windsor Castle. On Friday, a most splendid triumphal arch of evergreens and flowers, surmounted by the Royal Standard, the Union Jack, and other handsome banners and flags, was erected across the High Street a short distance west of the Market House. From an early hour on Saturday morning, most of the houses along the road displayed banners and flags, and decorations of flowers and evergreens. Soon after 8 o'clock, vehicles of every description, filled with respectably dressed persons, thronged into Uxbridge for the purpose of witnessing the royal progress. And before noon, both sides of the road for a long distance were lined with spectators. The Uxbridge Yeomanry, commanded by Mr. Hugh de Burgh, assembled at 11 o'clock for the purpose of escorting the royal cortege through that part of the journey. The Uxbridge Volunteers, with their splendid band, were in attendance by the arch, as also were the men of the West Middlesex Militia. Shortly after 2 o'clock, the royal cortege, consisting of 3 carriages, each drawn by 4 horses, with postilions, was seen in approaching the town down Page's Lane. And on entering High Street, the Uxbridge Yeomanry formed an escort in fine style. Captains Cox and Newdigate rode on each side of the Queen's carriage. Throughout the town, the reception of the royal party was most gratifying, the cheers reverberating from one end of the street to the other. At the Triumphal Arch, the band played the national anthem, while the Uxbridge Volunteers and the West Middlesex Militia presented arms as the royal cavalcade passed. On reaching the turnpike on the Hillingdon Road, the royal party turned right towards Cowley, and on entering Buckinghamshire at Iver, the Uxbridge Yeomanry were relieved by a troop of the 11th Prince Albert's Hussars. And there we are, Queen Victoria and Albert came through. They didn't actually get out, but anyway, the progress was duly noted. Next, Uxbridge found itself in early 1922 with a troublesome Christmas ghost on its hands. The annoying fellow declined to be laid or to observe regular hours and ordinary psychic conventions. He appears sometimes just after dusk and is not above giving 2 shows a night. He is the figure of an elderly man with a close-fitting cap, but his presence is felt rather than seen. He arrives on a wave of cold air calculated to freeze the blood and make even well-brilliantined hair stand on end. The scene of his performance is the house of Mr. Burrows in Cowley Road. Burrows is a job master and a member of the Volunteer Fire Brigade. He used to drive the fire engine before the horses gave way to the motor. A hale and hearty man with no spiritualistic leanings, he's the last person on earth to let a ghost vex him. Recent events have set the nerves of his family, his wife, daughter, and 3 sons, on edge. For during the last few weeks, footsteps have been heard of a person climbing the stairs with a deliberate tread, when no member of the family was near the stairs at the time. And the ghost seems to haunt the bedrooms. Mr. Burrows states that last Tuesday, as he lay in bed, he had an uncanny experience. He bent over me and mesmerized me. I lay there as if I was paralyzed, he said. 3 friends of Mr. Burrows, who are students of psychic matters, but hard-headed businessmen, came to see the ghost. They sat in the stable behind the house from about 9 o'clock in the evening to 1 in the morning, but nothing occurred. But a second visit on New Year's Eve was more successful. One, sitting on a bin, felt someone trying to lift the lid beneath him, and the table began to move. By means of table rapping, they tried to obtain a message from the ghost, and he began to spell his name. He spelt out G-E-O-R-G and then stopped. The ghost is being identified as George Barnett, a hurdle maker who lived in the house a generation or so ago. He's remembered for the sharpness of his temper as well as for the excellence of his work. Now, what has upset George, rattling the pans in Mrs. Burrows' scullery and bringing freezing blasts of air with him, no one can guess. It is only fair to say that one of the investigators claims that during his quest for George, he managed to lose a bad cold. Well, that article appeared in the London Evening News on January the 7th, 1922. Not everybody, I think, believed the story because someone commented later, "It is reported from Uxbridge that a ghost of a man wearing a cloth cap has been seen in a house in the neighbourhood. That is certainly not in accordance with the best traditions. There should always be a sort of dignity about a ghost, and a cloth cap is painfully common. Most respectable ghosts carry their head underneath their arm. A cap sticks in the gizzard, and we are told that the ghost is heralded by the noise of rattling pans. All the best ghosts rattle chains. My final little story this morning concerns an experience that my wife had. She has been going to the same hairdresser in Uxbridge for over 50 years. About 30 years ago, her hairdresser bought a business at the west end of the high street next to Fountains Mill, where the hairdressing continued. The building was erected in 1743 and was originally a beer house called the Prince of Wales Feathers. Later, that was usually just shortened to the Feathers. There was living accommodation upstairs, there was a side entrance, and a deep cellar below extending under the road outside, with a trapdoor there leading to inside the shop. The trapdoor revealed steps down to the cellar. It closed as a beer house in the 1930s and afterwards became a series of shops, principally a milliner's, a children's clothing shop, and then eventually a hairdresser. The hairdresser bought the shop in the 1970s, but one of her clients was a psychic medium. And one day, when this lady was having her hair done, she said to the hairdresser, "Do you realize that there is a man standing next to you wearing a leather apron? He's just come up from the cellar telling me that his name is Charlie and that he has a terrible headache." The hairdresser said she felt it was cold next to her, but she couldn't see anything. And as time went by, the people working in the shop began to realize that when they went to work on a Monday morning, things that they had left tidily and in place on a Saturday evening had all been moved. My wife was told this story when she next went in to have her hair done. So when she came home, she asked me if I knew the names of the innkeepers at the Feathers. Was there one called Charlie? I looked up my records of the innkeepers of Uxbridge, found a name, and obtained a death certificate from the local registry office. The certificate was for a Charles George Dale, innkeeper at the Feathers, who had died on the 23rd of November 1905, aged 65. And the cause of death, brain hemorrhage. Here was Charlie with the leather apron of a landlord, suffering headaches. Charles Dale, landlord, died of a brain hemorrhage. My wife took this information back to the hairdressers, and the medium, who happened to be there having her hair done, was astonished. My wife gave a copy of the death certificate to her, and she said, well, for the first time in her life, her sighting had been proved correct. After that, Charlie was never seen again. He had been put to rest.
Good old Charlie and the hairdressers.
Well, I'm very sceptical about all these ghost stories, but I must confess that left me just wondering.
Yeah, it's too spooky to be true. Well, thank you very much, Ken. More next month, and bye for now.